I'd like to thank and introduce our elected officials joining us for the Tele-Town Hall and give each of them an opportunity to share some brief opening remarks. And we'll start with Congresswoman Elise Stefanik.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank both the Ticonderoga Chamber of Commerce as well as the Saranac Lake Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. Thank you for all of your work answering questions from our small businesses. This is a real partnership from the local level up to the federal level as we work together to combat and beat coronavirus. In terms of what my office has focused on is partnering with our county public health officials and our county coronavirus task forces on a week-to-week and daily basis in terms of their requests for PPE, their additional requests for test kits. In addition, we've been in close contact with all of our hospitals across the district, as well as taking incoming questions from individuals and small businesses in terms of the economic relief programs that are available. Congress has passed 3 major bipartisan legislative packages. The first was focused on significant funding for vaccination development and research surrounding coronavirus. The second package ensures that any costs related to testing are free, regardless of whether you are insured or uninsured, because we want to make sure people have access and no out-of-pocket costs for tests. That's something that we need to continue working on in terms of the access and the number of test supplies coming to, frankly, across the country, but specifically to rural parts of upstate New York. The third package that was passed included significant funding for small business administration programs, specifically the Paycheck Protection Program, which is a loan that a portion can be forgiven to be used on payroll, utilities, rent, and mortgage interest. We know this is a time of great uncertainty for our small businesses, and we really wrote this in a way to provide support as soon as possible for Main Street. This is a large program. It includes $350 billion allocated to it, and we're working with our local SBA partners and our lenders to get guidance and answer their questions in real time as this program is lifted off the ground. So thank you to everyone for the fact that we are working together, small businesses, nonprofits, community organizations, our county offices of the aging, county public health are stepping up, and it's really been a team effort, and I'm honored to be here to answer questions with my state elected colleagues. I'll turn it back to you.
Next, I would like to introduce Senator Betty Little. If you happen to have a few opening remarks, we'd be happy to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, and thank you for facilitating this call and information for everyone. First of all, my hat's off and my gratitude to all of our healthcare workers who are on the front line. They are really the ones who are working 7 days a week, some of them 24 hours a day on call and all to get through this. We are in uncharted waters. It's affecting every part of our lives. Every single day I get up and think, oh, maybe today there will be some good news. I also want to thank the teachers. I mean, no one ever expected to be teaching online for this long a period of time, and we still have, until April 29th to keep it going. So that's a really tough job for teachers and for all of our students, to them to hang in there and get through this as best they can. The good news, I think, is that I think the information that we are getting, everyone, is so significant. To be able to see the president on television every day and his COVID task force. I'm a real admirer of Dr. Britt. I can't get over how much I like her and the information she shares. And to see the governor on television every day and his team, Dr. Hooker, Commissioner Hooker. It's so important. And I think that everyone in our community is benefiting by having these daily information. So hopefully, and I am the eternal optimist, I just hope that tomorrow even will be better than today, and we'll be closer to the end of this.
Thank you, Senator Little. Assemblyman Steck, would you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank both the Thai Chamber and the Saranac Lake Chambers. And as Betty pointed out, and Elise, thanks to so many people that are dealing with this, on our behalf to keep us all safe and to provide medical services for us. And then they have to go home to their own home and deal with the stress of that. And, there's a lot of people that are really laying it all on the line for us, and it's really appreciated. But I know we're kind of here to talk about, chamber issues and businesses, and the other side of this coin, besides the health issue, obviously, is the economy. And, a lot of people are anxious to get back at it. And there's a lot of people that are really hurting right now. They've lost their business, they've lost their jobs, they've got financial stress, and that becomes a medical issue eventually as well. So anything that we can do, my office, we're very responsive. We field basically two types of calls: unemployment calls and am I an essential business call. And we're happy to help with any of those. And one thing I've always been putting out on unemployment is they're overwhelmed with the website and the central call number. But if people call my office, or certainly Senator Little's or Billy's, I'm sure we have our own avenues to pass information along to DOL to try to expedite those claims. So, just use our offices as a resource, I guess, is something that I want to just make sure I leave with everybody. But thanks again for having us.
Thanks, Assemblyman Steck. And last but not least, Assemblyman Jones, nice to hear from you. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, just echoing what my colleagues have said. Thank you for hosting this. I think it's important that we continue to communicate with our constituents. I do want to say that my office is still working diligently, as I know my other colleagues on the line are. They're answering questions. We are practicing social distancing and remote office work, but we are we are working hard, probably as hard as we have, but it's nothing compared to what other people are going through out there. And we continue to field calls, as Dan and other people have said, about unemployment insurance, other issues that have popped up from small businesses to residents. Lately, we've been fielding a lot of calls on testing issues, and I know that all of us on this phone call have as well, and we're pushing our federal and our state to provide more testing for the North Country. I realize this is like Betty had said, this is uncharted territory, and this situation continues to evolve daily. But I assure you that myself and along with my colleagues on the phone are working as hard as we can to try to get people answers, correct information, and to try to help them out and connect them with the agencies that will help them the most. And I continue every day. I'm on conference calls with our local health departments, with EOC, our EOCs, people all across the region, just our hospitals, to see how we can help. And this continues to be an evolving situation, and we certainly are working hard at it for our residents. And I want to thank our first responders, our healthcare workers out there, our law enforcement, for putting their lives on the line for us. And we need to back them as well during this. So thank you, and looking forward to the questions.
Thanks again to all of our representatives for being on the line and to help answer our questions. We do have a number of questions, so we'll just jump right into it. And the first set of questions is for Congresswoman Stefanik. And the first one has to do with reports that both the House and Senate are dealing with conversations and negotiations on a new round of relief efforts for the country. We'd like to ask your opinion on how necessary you feel those new relief efforts are, and what would you view as some priorities for new legislation?
Absolutely. So I support additional relief legislation, and what's being discussed right now is additional immediate funding for the SBA, the Small Business Administration Paycheck Protection Program. We've funded that up to $350 billion. That is a very large number, but as you are probably reading in the news, there is a tremendous amount of need for that. And the number of small business applicants we've seen across the district, as we've talked to both the small businesses and our lenders, is significant. The number we would like to see immediately increased is an additional $250 billion. That's being discussed right now. We likely will pass that before the end of this month to ensure that the funds are there. So I feel very confident that we will get that done. In addition, I think there will be numerous legislative packages because the scope of this pandemic is so unprecedented. Additional funding that I believe we need to prioritize for rural hospitals, community health centers, and other healthcare providers. I also think we need to look at hazard pay for essential workforce, particularly for those healthcare workers on the front lines. And then when we get beyond this as a country, I do think there will be, there's a great interest on both sides of the aisle on strengthening our manufacturing base here so that we're not reliant on importing PPE, masks, ventilators, or gowns, for example. I also think having a similar commission that was created after 9/11, but specifically focused on coronavirus and our readiness when it comes to pandemic issues, I think that will be very important moving forward. So yes, absolutely, round 4, additional funding for the SBA PPP program, additional funding in future legislative packages for hospitals, healthcare workers, but I think there's going to be a lot of long-term legislative work that we need to do.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question from those in attendance, again for Congresswoman Stefanik. The rollout of the SBA programs in the CARES Act has caused confusion among lenders, economic development organizations, and small businesses. How is your office providing timely information to these groups? And where can people get information on a timely manner from the SBA for guidance?
This is a great question. There has been confusion both from the small business perspective, from the lender perspective, and even our local SBA leaders, because this is such a new program. It was written in a historically fast amount of time. The way my office is trying to get that information out there is I have a website, stefanik.house.gov/coronavirus, that I hope you will all access. It has frequently asked questions. Most of them are related to the SBA program, although it also includes other types of questions we're getting, like individual relief. We are hosting these conference calls with our chambers of commerce, and we are also taking incoming calls. I've spoken with hundreds and hundreds of small businesses to walk them through their eligibility, what they will need. In addition, we've had calls with our local lenders, so our local community banks, credit unions, with SBA administrators and regional directors to answer questions specifically. And then, we've also helped write some of the guidance. For example, on Friday, when the SBA launched the PPP program, we were hearing both from the banks and from our local seasonal small businesses that there was not specific guidance given to the eligibility of those seasonal businesses who are not up and running on February 15th, which was how the guidance was written. I called the Deputy Secretary of Treasury, brought it to their attention. They turned it around by Monday, and the guidance was reissued. So we're actually helping write the guidance as these issues come up. So for our financial institutions on the line, as well as small business, if you see these really detailed issues that are not clear, please contact my office because we are turning them around quickly. The chambers. The other way that we're trying to get the information out is through the chambers, which have great relationships with our SBA leaders in the region.
Thank you, Congresswoman. There's a somewhat of a in the weeds question to follow up kind of with what you were just talking about. On a recent call with the SBA, a questioner has heard that the $10,000 advance within the economic injury disaster loan is there's a different interpretation and guidance that was come out for that $10,000 advance, and it doesn't seem to be based on the need of the applicant or the eligible expenses that the applicant is applying for, but rather it's a $1,000 per employee. Could you help clarify where that guidance is coming from, and do you think that guidance was appropriately determined?
This guidance needs to be updated, and we've been pressing SBA for clarity on this issue. As the law is written, the law allows up to $10,000, but it does not entitle businesses to this whole amount. So we are working to get more information about why there are these reports of a policy of $1,000 per employee. This is an issue that we will also continue to push SBA to get this guidance out as soon as possible, because we know businesses have already applied for this.
Thank you. Our next question is, one of the deterrents we've heard for applying for the Paycheck Protection Program is that federal payroll taxes are not eligible for the forgiveness. We have heard from several employers that not bringing people back due to not wanting to incur this liability. Do you anticipate any more benefits or credits coming out that will address this?
It's a good question. So the Paycheck Protection Program, the idea here is to provide short-term relief, immediate liquidity to our small businesses to pay their payroll costs, to pay utilities, rent, mortgage interest. We really want to ensure that our businesses have that liquidity to keep their employees on staff. What it also includes is a deferral when it comes to payroll taxes. Businesses are allowed to pay those over the next 2 years, with half due on December 31st, 2021, and the other half due on December 31st, 2022. So that will lighten the immediate burden of the payroll taxes. We can look into additional relief, but that's what's been included in the CARES Act.
So another question related to the PPP program. A lot of businesses, especially in New York State, had to close earlier than when the PPP program was passed, and they had to lay off their employees, and those employees went on unemployment. Can a business apply for the PPP to bring back those employees, and wouldn't that mean that those employees would then have to come off of their unemployment?
Yes, another good question. This is the primary goal of the program, as we want our workers to remain connected with their employers. If the employees are working more than 3 days a week or earning more than the max benefit rate, then they will no longer be eligible for unemployment.
The next question is, please explain how the federal government is protecting nonprofit workers and organizations that are having earned income dry up.
Another really good question. So we know how important our nonprofits are in this region. 501c3s are eligible for these SBA Paycheck Protection loans, and they can use it to pay their workers and have the portion forgiven that's used for payroll, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. The other way that we wanted to incentivize people to give and support their nonprofits in their communities is, right now, if you take the standard deduction on your taxes, you're not able to deduct additionally the charitable contributions. We've changed that in the CARES Act, so it allows an individual to deduct an additional $300 if they take the standard deduction and do not itemize. It also raises the limit that can be deducted for those who do itemize their taxes. So for the vast majority of the families in this district who take the standard deduction, they will be allowed to deduct above the line that additional $300 for charitable donations. And lastly, the CARES Act also provides a 50% reimbursement to nonprofits and government entities that are not part of the state unemployment system for the unemployment benefit costs they incur.
Thanks for explaining those new additions that came out in the CARES Act, Congresswoman. To transition a little bit to some more public health questions regarding this crisis, there's a question about recent developments of conversation in the public sphere about unproven medications being supported without some scientific consensus and FDA approval related to COVID-19. What is the federal government doing to work on new vaccines and medicines related to COVID-19? And what is your view on the support for those unproven medications?
I think we really have to defer to our public health officials, which is why, in terms of the information my office is putting out, is from the CDC, from our county public health officials, and from New York State Department of Health. In terms of what Congress has done, our first coronavirus bill included that $4 billion to develop new vaccination and treatments. I do think the FDA needs to ramp up its efforts, and we are not in typical times here, and the typical bureaucratic process, we need to work faster, smarter, and better. And an example of that is the test lag in terms of getting the actual test results. Initially, if you remember back a few weeks ago, that lag time was unacceptably long because the FDA wanted their labs to micromanage that process. The fact that they loosened up and allowed the states to designate private labs and New York State run labs to run those tests, which I supported when the governor made that call, that was important for the FDA to get up to speed and accept that flexibility. So again, important to defer to county public health, to CDC, and of course to New York State Department of Health, but you have to jumpstart the FDA approval. Priority for me moving forward is getting these faster tests approved and into the communities, specifically rural communities, as quickly as possible, because I think that's very much tied eventually to getting the economy back up and running, is making sure that a much higher percentage of our population is tested.
Thank you so much for that information. The next question is a focus on state and federal government's funding and loss of revenue. With the likely loss of revenue for both state and federal government, what are solutions to maintain the status quo for school funding during a likely recession from a federal perspective?
From the federal perspective, and then you want me to push it over to the state folks now, or we'll wait for their questions? But the federal perspective, the bill that we passed provides $13.2 billion to be distributed to states and local school districts based off of the Title I allocations, which can be used for a wide range of activities, including technology and devices for students. And then it also provides an additional $150 billion for states to replace that lost tax revenue. We need to work in future bills to get a higher share for New York, since we've had such a significant impact and we're the epicenter. But I'll defer to my state colleagues on the budget question.
We'll go ahead and give our state reps a second.
Okay, this is Betty. And the budget this year for schools, what they came out with in the budget is pretty flat. What they used is the formula aid for last year is pretty much the same. Their categorical aids will be on what they use. The money that came from the federal government, part of that $13 billion, New York State got about $1 billion, which they put into this education formula and took out about $1 billion of state. So they used it to replace some of the state money, and that's how they were able to at least keep them flat. The biggest problem in the budget is that, it has a quarterly assessment where the governor can add or subtract going forward, depending upon the needs, because it is pretty unknown. But the help from the federal government is very, very important.
Yeah. This is Assemblyman Jones as well. Yeah. The senator is exactly right. The $1 billion that we received from the feds was in place of we're expecting a $10 to $15 billion loss. We were able to keep the education budget flat. I know that doesn't sound good, and it's not solace to anybody on this phone call or to any of our school districts, but we are going through extraordinary times. Hopefully we can get through this at some point in the near future, and we can tell what our revenues coming in will be. It's still a big unknown, as the senator had said. We just do not know what the revenues will be, but certainly I know all my state colleagues and on this phone call, we've been pushing for an increase in education funding. In a normal year, we've been pushing for big increases, but this year it's still an unknown on what's going to come in. And the governor does have the power to adjust that, as Betty had said, and hopefully we'll see revenues come in here, soon, as soon as we get over this public health crisis. But we just did not know what the projections were for revenues, and I don't think anybody does. I think you can ask any economist out there, and we don't know because we simply don't know when we're going to be able to get over this.
And I'd add to what Billy Jones just said. This is Dan. That it was, in my opinion, a small miracle that we were able to get through this budget and not cut education. I know in the past that's been a place that was hit about 10 or 12 years ago, and it took us about 10 years to dig out of that hole. The concern is, and it's worked into the budget, as everyone knows, the budget director has been given authority to withhold some of this funding. So really the budget that we pass is a high water mark. And if the revenues don't come back, then we're gonna be facing, frankly, cuts. So while we made it through this year's budget, 6 months from now, who knows what the revenues may look like, and next year's budget could be even uglier.
Thanks for addressing both the sides of that question. Matt, I think if it's all right with you, I might jump ahead here, just time's sake, to get to some questions so we can include our state reps.
That sounds perfect. Let's go ahead and do that.
So these questions, I think, might have a focus on both a federal perspective and a state perspective. So if we'll start with Congresswoman Stefanik to answer, and then we can go to our state reps. And Congresswoman, if you don't feel you have a perspective to give on that, we can just defer to our state reps on that. So to start, the first question here would be, this is a challenging time for everyone within our counties, in the state, and across the country. There's just a simple question here about cooperation instead of competition for essential equipment and supplies for areas that are hurt with the pandemic. I know that there's reports in the media of states trying to outcompete each other for those necessary supplies. Is there just a perspective that you can provide on how we should be going about cooperating in this atmosphere?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the federal level, there should be more coordination. We shouldn't have states and counties competing against one another, driving up the cost, and that has been a challenge. I also think, again, from the federal perspective, this is highlighting that we're too dependent upon our foreign manufacturers rather than domestic manufacturing or North American manufacturing, and I think that is a lesson learned that we're going to have to tackle in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are seeing cooperation. I know the hospitals have all been on a call with the governor's office statewide, but they also talk to each other all the time. Just recently, Glens Falls needed some what they call chemo gowns for health personnel who are working in the labs and the cancer unit where they are using chemotherapy, and they felt they only had a 1 week or 2 week supply. This has nothing to do with the COVID thing, but, in talking to Michelle LeBeau in Plattsburgh, she said she called Glens Falls and had 240 of those gowns to give them. So they're very interested in working together. But as the Congresswoman said, Made in America is becoming more and more important, and we have to develop manufacturing in the United States that is making these kinds of things. The reliance on other countries for pharmaceuticals is just, we shouldn't be doing that. And we've learned this lesson. So that and other things. And certainly we have many, many companies in New York State that could expand going forward and get into making some of these products that we're looking all over the country for and all over the world.
Yeah, this is Billy. I couldn't agree more with what the Congresswoman and Senator had said. And now we're seeing great cooperation between states. California and Oregon, they're shipping out their ventilators that they're not using anymore, and New York has promised to do the same. When we're done with them, we will spread them across to other states that are at the height of this pandemic. So I think we are seeing great cooperation. We need to see more of it, and I think everybody on this, or the representatives on this phone call, have have done a great job of cooperating with each other to make sure the needs of the North Country are met. In saying that, we still need to push our state partners and our federal partners to get more PPE and just more testing in general. It's really becoming an issue. So, but I know everyone on this phone call is working on that as well.
And I'd like to join in as well and say, yes, I think that the cooperation has been good. I think that it's encouraging to see so many people want to be generous. I mean, it's a natural human reaction to a crisis is that the vast majority of people want to help their neighbor. But the thing is, you got to get beyond that emotional response. It needs to be fair. It needs to be thought out. It needs to be thoughtful. In order to be effective, to say, well, if your neighbor's house is on fire, lend them your garden hose. Well, that's a nice gesture, but it might be a better idea to call 911 and get the fire truck there. So I think in recent days we've seen a pivot where beyond just being fired up and emotional and wanting to help, that we're starting to see a concerted effort to reach out to places that make sense to get resources, other states that aren't in the middle of it, that aren't right next door where the brush fire is raging, and it could easily be here next week, and we could be having a simultaneous peak. I think it was a great move to reach out to the federal government and to other states to say, hey, lend us some materials and we'll be there for you. So I think that we're doing it a much smarter way now. But it's, it's still encouraging to see people just want to jump in and help. We need to encourage that, but we also need to be smart in how we marshal those resources.
Thank you so much. Our next question is regards to unemployment rates. Are we as business owners going to see an increase in both our federal and New York State unemployment rates due to the added $600 unemployment benefit in the CARES package?
Well, I would say I certainly hope not, but unemployment is based upon, your experience and where you are and what your ratings are. And, unless if you're a non-essential business, and even some of the essential businesses are having high unemployment, I think this whole period of time has to be disregarded as far as having an effect on raising the rates. But it's something we definitely need to bring up to the administration.
Yes, definitely. I agree with Betty, and I would just hope that we could just throw out this period that we're going through as far as the businesses. But I believe some of the federal money, and Elise would know more about this than I would. The federal money was subsidized to the states to help with their unemployment insurance funds.
Yes, that's correct. So in the CARES Act, that additional $600 on top of the traditional unemployment, that's fully funded and covered by the federal government. So the state will not be out any funding for providing that additional $600. In addition, the 13 weeks beyond the traditional 4-month unemployment time period, that also will be funded by the federal government.
Any other representatives?
I also just wanted to add, I think in this year's budget, where the federal government and last year gave $2.8 billion to New York State for unemployment, this year it's like $43 billion.
Yeah.
Right. And for those reasons, I don't think that you should see or expect to see. I think everyone's sensitive to, we just can't pivot from this and then turn around and dump it all on hiking unemployment insurance rate. The federal aid is going a long way to keep that from happening, and certainly the $600, as was pointed out, is largely a federal program. So, we don't want to add insult to injury when we come out of this and hammer everyone with a higher unemployment rate.
So to transition a little bit about how both federal and state government is trying to address the overwhelming need to keep our first responders and essential municipal employees safe by ensuring that they are able to have the right access to the necessary personal protective equipment. What type of municipal support is out there at the federal state level doing to try to address that?
At the federal level, the president did use the Defense Production Act. I had called on him to use it earlier to require our large manufacturers in this country to reorient their capabilities towards making PPE. That is happening. So you will see a significant increase, I think, in PPE availability. We're also working just kind of on a constituent services basis with each of the counties and hospitals as those requests are necessary, sending them in both to the state, but also getting creative in terms of where they can buy additional PPE. I mean, we're talking rapid response, as in, you know, here's someone who's selling masks out of Western New York. Let's make that available to the counties in our district. So that's how we've been helping, but I do think the federal government should have a more coordinated role to ensure that we're allocating the supplies.
Certainly agree with what Elise said. You know, I think we're all working with our local emergency responders, certainly our hospitals, and I have to give our hats off to our hospitals. You know, we all communicate with them regularly to make sure they have the PPE that they need. And, you know, lean a lot on our state and our federal partners for this. We really do. And hopefully the production of more equipment from the federal government will certainly continue to push for it to get down to the local levels, because you have to have it on the local level, the boots on the ground, the people that know where it needs to go. And that's the tack that we're taking in my office.
Senator Little or Assemblyman Steck, anything to add?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Nope. You know, I think it's something that we all have to work on, and we are.
Yep, I agree.
One last federal specific question. When should Americans expect the personal federal stimulus checks to arrive?
Good question. So within the next 2 weeks, hopefully the next week, and we're getting a lot of questions on this. So if you give me a couple minutes, I'll walk through. This is based upon how you file your taxes. So if you file your taxes with direct deposit, then the checks will be made direct deposit. If you file your taxes via U.S. Postal, then the checks will lag behind, but those will be mailed to you. For any seniors who are on this call, the feds will be working with the Social Security Administration to have that information, use that to send out the stimulus checks. So seniors do not have to file taxes if they traditionally do not do so. I also know there was another question sent in, I'll just add this into it, about why high school seniors and college kids were not included in the stimulus package if they're on their own and not a dependent. I do think Congress should look at this in future packages. Again, the design was to base it off of tax filings. And one way that we did help our college students is we did provide student loan relief by suspending payments and interest until September 30th to get through this economic and health crisis.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
So let me ask Elise on this. If a college student is independent and files an income tax of their own, are they eligible or not?
Yes, if they file an income tax, if they file a tax return, they are eligible. Okay. I think that the question that was sent in was for the college students who are dependents. I mean, that's, and they don't file income taxes. We need to work on that. But yes, if you file tax returns, that is how the eligibility is going to be determined. And just to add further clarifications, it will be determined on your most recent tax return. If you have filed your 2019, that's what they will base it on. Most people, it'll be based on their 2018.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for providing some insight into that and for addressing some of those other questions that were sent in ahead of time. We have a couple New York State specific questions that I want to offer to our state representatives. And it starts with the budget that was just went through last week and passed. And I just wanted to offer an opportunity for our state reps to provide some insight into the reasons for voting or not voting for the budget and for specific budget provisions. And we'll start with Senator Little.
Yeah, well, for the first time in history, we were voting remotely. And since I am of a senior age, I was not in Albany and signed in through Zoom every day. But and we voted on the budget that way. And I did vote no. There were a lot of good things in the budget, and I'm not saying that there weren't. It was so much, so quick, and so much unknown about it. But circumstances being what they were, it's the way it was done this year.
Assemblyman Jones, do you have some insight into your reasoning for some of your votes?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed. I'm extremely disappointed on how much policy was put into this budget. And I know Dan and Betty and I always complain about putting so much policy in the budget. And in this year, I just figured, or I think we all assumed that in this year, what we're going through, we could just stick to the numbers and not plug policy in there. I was really disappointed, almost disgusted about how much policy was attached to a lot of these budget bills. We had 8 or 9 budget bills that we voted on. I voted no on some, yes on some, because it was a mixed bag. But the more policy laden bills, I voted no on, simply because we needed to really concentrate just on the numbers. And there was some policy in there that wasn't bad, and there's some policy in there that was very bad. We got some changes to the bail reform, certainly not enough to bail and discovery. I didn't think it went far enough, but we certainly got some changes that I think will help. But as far as overall in there, I don't think we did enough to help small business, and actually some policy that hurt it. I don't think we did enough to help our counties and our local governments, and some policy I believe that will further hurt them. So just really disappointed in it, in the budget overall, the process. I think we should have been concentrating on the numbers, because if you in a budget, that's what you should be concentrating on. But especially this year, while we're going through this health crisis, a crisis that none of us have seen and none of us hopefully will ever see again, we should have made the budget about a fiscal document. And we were put in a position, some of us, where we basically had to keep government going. We had to, you have to pass a budget to keep our state workers paid, and certainly to keep our health department funded. But I did not like the situation we were put in this year, and I didn't like how the budget came out. There were a few good things in there, few initiatives that I was able to get through for the North Country, as far as seniors and agriculture and the business community were concerned. But other than that, I was very disappointed.
And I'll add to that. I mean, I agree totally with what Billy just said. One of my beefs in my 8 years in the Assembly now has been that our annual budget contains far too much policy. It always does. It's $178 billion state budget, twice the size of Florida's state budget. And yet it seems the lion's share of the holdups, the negotiations, and the back and forth focuses on policy issues, which should be carved out and not part of the financial document. With that said, given these unprecedented times where we've got a worldwide crisis on our hands, and that has turned into a financial and fiscal crisis for our budgets, now is the time, and we're all trying to do this remotely or not without talking to each other. How do you do that with a $178 billion budget? How do you do the budget justice like that? But that was a safe thing to do. But that was all the more reason to just make it about a document about our finances. In just the 2 months from when the coronavirus and the budget process started to the adoption of the budget, we had a $10 billion hole in our revenue. So we really should have focused on that. And frankly, I think we did a good job at plugging holes everywhere to not cut anything. But in a lot of ways, it almost looked like that the framers of the budget were in denial that we were in the middle of this crisis, that they were trying to maintain the status quo everywhere. I voted against the budget. I did not like the additional authority that we gave the budget and the governor and the budget director to cut the budget throughout the year. So, I mean, is it or isn't a planning document? Isn't it something that local governments and our nonprofits can count on, can base their budgets off of? The one policy piece that I wanted to be in there was to fix some of the policy mess in last year's budget on bail reform. And as Billy said, it didn't go nearly far enough. We're taking sales tax from our counties to cover hospitals. We need to cover our hospitals. I'm not sure that taking it from the counties is the right way to do it. It's passing the buck. A lot more borrowing, the prison closures, and now we've given the governor 90-day authority to close a prison. I'm not sure that that's good for our communities that have prisons in them that are such a vital part of their economy. And Billy touched on this as well, but there was nothing in there for business, for small business. And we know that when we come out of this crisis, small businesses are going to be what's going to jumpstart our economy again. So there was some good things in the budget. Don't get me wrong. There were some things that were funded that I was very pleased with. But I think that we could have done a better job on this budget.
A follow-up question in regards to the budget process and specific the consolidated funding application. Nonprofit organizations and North Country businesses rely on the consolidated funding application process to access state funds. Can you speak to how you think this process might be delayed or changed due to the current crisis and pandemic?
Well, there's going to be changes in a lot of things, and I really don't know how that's going to work. We still know that anyone applying for things needs to be, the process and procedures that's already in place. But there may be changes going forward. I just don't know them at this time, but we'll try to find out.
Yeah, as Betty said, I mean, there's certain deadlines and guidelines that have to be met at certain times throughout the year. And, these groups meet, the regional economic development councils meet, and I think that's that's not planned right now. So I would say that some of these deadlines would have to be changed, but we just don't know. Like she said, we don't know yet.
You'll have to extend the deadlines for the use of a lot of these funds, and all of these deadlines need to be looked at.
Yep, and I'd agree. I mean, I think that this goes, certainly it's understandable that we're kind of building the airplane as we fly it right now. It's literally every day, it's something that is being reacted to, which is why we've had, I believe, 12 executive orders in the last, 5 or 6 weeks from the governor. So I suspect that among those things, like the tax filing deadline and sales tax collection, is that these deadlines will probably get a look to and either be addressed by the executive or by the legislature in the future.
Well, just to jump off of what Assemblyman Steck said about the recent deluge of executive orders coming from Governor Cuomo to help protect us during this time of crisis, there is a question about the recently extended New York State on pause mandate that Governor Cuomo did to extend it to the end of the month. And there's a question about seasonal residents downstate wanting to know when it might be safe for them to be able to start traveling again and to return to the area where they have their second homes. And I will offer, this came specifically from someone from the Lake George area, so I'll let Senator Little and Assemblyman Steck answer first, but Senator Little, do you have any insight into this
I
concern?
do. Good heavens, our second home residents are important, not just for the taxes they pay, but for what they do in the community and participating and being here and going to restaurants and all that kind of thing. And I think what we were saying here is that, similar to what other states were saying about people from New York coming to, if you come, we would ask for a, self-quarantine for 14 days, especially if you come from an area that has high incidence of the COVID-19 virus. So, and I know one community even offered to have people drop off their groceries to them or run errands for them or something like that. But I think, it's a changing circumstance, but they certainly are welcome here. I also know, we haven't touched on this, but we've been asked a lot about campgrounds. And the state has closed their campgrounds until Memorial Day at this point, I believe. But some of the campgrounds in our area do have RVs, and some of them have seasonal RVs. They also have some cabins. They would be allowed to use those because they are an alternative housing. And what would happen is that at the campground, you would not be able to have tents or pop-up trailers that didn't have a bathroom facility in it, because there can be no public bathrooms open, no pool that's open, no eat-in restaurant that's open, takeout, no activities, no entertainment, no public gatherings. But there are people who, in order to get away, want to come north and stay in their RV. And there are people who come, you know, from southern states back up here for the summer. So that's the way the status is right now. And, you know, it's a changing thing since everything is so new to us.
And I'd echo that too. You know, certainly, you know, our second homeowners and snowbirds are welcome to return. But as Betty said, there's just some realities, some medical realities that people should be self-quarantining so that they don't spread it, or this will never end. So that's important. A lot of concern in my district has been around recreational travel. People are coming up to exercise and get away for a day or two because there's nothing to do back home, and they're clogging the trailheads and they're clogging the stores, and then they're leaving. But in the meantime, they're putting everyone at risk, and so there's been a lot of pushback there. But you know, I think again, just people need to be smart and courteous and thoughtful of their actions so that they don't spread this. And so anyone that's coming back to the area, by all means, but just be mindful of what you're doing and follow the quarantine procedures.
Assemblyman Jones, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I certainly I concur with what they said. I mean, there's a lot of we're on calls all the time, and there's a lot of discussion around people from New York and downstate traveling up here. We simply ask that they stay at home. We want to be a welcoming place here in the North Country, and certainly and hopefully we will get back to that very, very soon. Second homeowners, Betty hit it right on the head. We value them. We want them here. We just ask them to take necessary precautions when they do get here to help protect and for the health of all of us. But certainly echo what each one of them said. We just hopefully the longer or the more we abide by the rules and stay home and quarantine and do all these things that we are asked to do, we will get over this sooner. These rules aren't put out there, and these asks aren't put out there to certainly punish anybody or to make anybody feel inferior. They're put out there so we can get over this and we can save lives and we can get over this quicker and get on with our day-to-day lives. So please continue to abide by the rules put out there. And if you're thinking about traveling up to the lovely Adirondacks or the North Country, we ask you to just maybe hold off a little bit in doing that. But certainly second homeowners, we still welcome them. We want them to come here, but just abide by the precautions that we're asking.
Yeah, and one of the things, as soon as we have this faster test, we would be able to say that even if someone had been exposed a week ago or 10 days ago, that they could find out whether they actually have it or not have it, or whether they've had it and then they're immune from it now. So we'll get there.
So we're coming to the end of our Tele-Town Hall meeting today. If your questions were not answered, we will follow up with you to get them answered this week. If you have additional questions, you feel free to email Patrick or myself. At this time, we'd like to give each of our representatives a few minutes to give a few brief closing remarks. And we will start with Congresswoman Elise Stefanik.
Well, thank you again to the Thai Chamber of Commerce and the Saranac Lake Area Chamber of Commerce for your partnership on this call and for all your hard work serving our small business community. And thank you to our partners at the state level, State Senator Betty Little, Assemblyman Dan Steck, and Assemblyman Billy Jones. This is really a team effort in terms of getting the information out to the community. As Billy said at the start of the call, my office is working. We are working overtime 24/7, answering incoming calls, whether they're small businesses, whether they are lenders, farmers, you name it. So we are here to work for you and continue to take feedback of your ideas and suggestions. I also just want to thank everyone for going above and beyond during this uncertain time and this health crisis. Please continue to follow guidance issued by county public health offices, CDC, and New York State Department of Health. We will get through this. This is a surreal experience for everyone, and we are going to pull together and get through this. So thank you again for the opportunity to answer questions today.
Thank you so much for being here with us. State Senator Betty Little.
Thank you. I too want to thank everyone, and certainly Elise and the chamber for putting this together. You know, one of the things we have to work at overcoming is the fear factor, and I think these phone calls and this information is being very helpful. And as we hopefully get to the end of this, we have to learn the lessons. You know, we have teachers who are teaching, and as a former teacher, not to have any personal contact with your students for this length of time and still be trying to do the things you know that they need in the educational formula is really tough. And we have to have internet service. Every house has to have it. It has to be affordable and regulated so it's not out of reach for anyone. I have 49 school districts in this Senate district, and most of the kids have Chromebooks, but they don't all have internet service. And they are missing out. And we can't let anything like that happen again. So that's a major thing. And I would ask everybody to support your local businesses, your restaurants that are doing takeout. And it's a great way to pick up food and bring it in and, you know, enjoy your home, but enjoy dinner being cooked by someone else. But it's important. Thanks to everyone for their endurance through this.
Thank you so much, Senator Little. Assemblyman Dan Steck.
Yep. Well, I too want to thank both the Thai Chamber and the Saranac Lake Chamber for the opportunity today. And Betty hit the nail on the head. You know, the information is our weapon right now to fight fear and to fight the virus. And so the more communication like this that we have, the better off I think we all are. So please, anything that anyone takes away from today's call, share it with your friends and neighbors. You know, there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to get there. We're going to be okay. But we're paying a heavy price, and in that journey, you know, thank you so much to everyone that's on the front lines that are doing this all the time, our medical providers especially, but you know, just everybody that's got to go to work, and our corrections officers that, you know, they have to go in there and deal with this, and they know that they're going into a place where it's breeding. There's just so many people that are fortunate enough to continue to have their jobs, but their jobs are very difficult ones right now. And then of course the people that are just victims of circumstance, and they've lost their jobs or their businesses are suffering right now. You're not alone. I think that both your state and federal governments are aware of that and doing everything that we reasonably can to try to mitigate that. But it's just, again, I'm encouraged by the spirit of the community all across the North Country. Everyone seems to have kept their positive attitude about them so far. And I think that's important too, to just keep your spirits as positive as you can. Because it's infectious. The people around you will pick up on those cues, especially the young people. So, I just think it's a really, really difficult situation. It's not anything that I ever thought I'd see in my lifetime. And, I think we're at our crest right now in New York State is what they believe as far as the numbers go. So hopefully we're going to be approaching a light at the end of the tunnel. And as our medical gurus catch up with this, and we get testing better, faster testing, and developing vaccines and treatments, that maybe we'll start to head back soon towards something that looks more like normal. But thanks again for this call.
Thank you so much. And Assemblyman Billy Jones.
I just want to echo what my colleagues have said here. Thank you to the chambers for putting this on. Thank you to Elise for hosting as well. I couldn't agree more with what they have said. We're going through a tough time, an unprecedented time, and it really is. It's frustrating. I understand that. I take calls. My staff takes calls every day on how frustrated people are, and I understand that. But we need to stick together. We need to get through this. We will get through this. And we just have to continue to abide by the rules. And we have to, listen to factual information. I can't stress that enough. Please, please, please listen to factual information put out by our offices and our local health departments and our emergency services people, our hospitals. Don't get your information all from Facebook. A lot of our time that is spent with our staffs are reading something on social media that just is not true, and we spend our time debunking those rumors. Those rumors are what they are. Please go and get factual information, and I know all of our offices are continuing to do that. We continue to work very, very hard, and we'll answer the phone, answer the emails, and answer the messages at any time, and we will continue to do that. But let's look out for each other, look out for our neighbors at a safe social distance way, but we can still do that. And I have to go along with what Betty said before. Our families are under a lot of stress now. They're doing distance learning and teaching at home. I am the teacher for my little girl this week, and I'll tell you what, first grade math is a little tougher than what I remember it is, but I have a whole new appreciation for what our teachers do for us, and just everyone. I want to thank my brothers and sisters in the correction department. I want to thank the police officers, the grocery store workers, the essential workers that continue to go to work every day to provide us with the services that are needed, and especially our healthcare professionals on the front line of this thing. And I'll tell you what, we will get through this. The North Country is strong. We rely on each other. We work together to get through this, and we will get through this. But just continue to be safe. Practice the policies that are put out there. I can't stress that enough, and we will get over this sooner. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for all that you're doing, and let's keep the lines of communication open. Be well and be safe.
Thank you to everyone who listened in today. I want to thank our elected officials for being here and being available to have questions and to hear some answers for our members and businesses and organizations and our community members who joined in. Thank you, everyone, for listening in today, and thank you to our elected officials for being available. As a reminder, if there's any questions that we were not able to get to today, we will be able to answer that via a follow-up communication. So feel free to reach out to Matt or myself so that we can be sure that we get those answers to you. And we'll be talking with our officials to make sure that we get those answers. And also, please remember that our county public health departments are putting out really important information every day. And I echo Assemblyman Jones and being able to listen to those officials at the county level to heed their advice. And I hope everyone stays well and healthy during this time. And thanks for participating today.